Hey everyone, and welcome to Almost Cancelled. I'm Peter, that is Connor, and we are going to talk about Westworld Season 3, Episode 3. It is called The Absence of Field. So, full spoilers for the episode, as always. So, it was a Charlotte episode. I mean, there was a decent amount of Dolores. It was the second plot was very Dolores and Caleb as well,
Yeah.
but it kind of focused on Charlotte, and apparently, I didn't watch the preview for next week, but apparently next week is going to be Man in Black. It's going to be Ed Harris.
Okay.
So
Fair enough.
they're going through kind of giving each character an episode, which is interesting because by the time they've done that, we'll be halfway through the season. And then, so it's interesting we're sort of setting up the story by going through each character, and because a lot of it is, overlapping. A lot of Charlotte stuff is overlapping with Dolores, and we're getting different sides of it. And even the stuff with last week with Maeve at the end, meeting Serac. He of course feeds into this plot and this week as well. So it's all very shared. It's all very much building a tapestry, a whole. So so Charlotte, we still don't know who's inside her. And I had thoughts like early on who was inside her, and then the more it went on, the more it made me doubt and maybe think of other characters. And now I have no idea.
Two options, maybe.
Because my first thought when she was crying at first, and when Dolores wakes her up, I was thinking, is it Teddy? But then I thought, no, Teddy went into the afterlife digital thing.
I do want to point out though, just because someone went in there, I don't think that necessarily means that it can't be them. Because it can be a backup copy. Clearly, as in the forge.
That's fair, yeah. So it could be him, but then later on when she kills the paedophile and like strangles him and says, "I remembered who I am," and I'm like, okay, this isn't Teddy. Teddy isn't this violent. Teddy was never this. And I was thinking, maybe Clementine, maybe Armistice, like
maybe,
because I do actually think this is actually kind of a neat idea to elevate one of the characters, because if it's someone who is now going to permanently be Tessa Thompson, who wasn't Tessa Thompson before, it's kind of like no digs at any of the actors who were playing before, but clearly Tessa Thompson's this bigger actress, right? And we had a lot of these characters who were relatively small. They were solid in what they were doing, but there were these sort of small bit players who were kind of in the background or just always there. I think it's an interesting idea for this to be one of them. Someone, because Dolores says she trusts whoever this is. I think it's an interesting idea, just kind of like, okay, they're now a main character, and it's a shame that the actor who originally portrayed them doesn't get to keep the job and be that bigger character. But I think it's an interesting tactic to then make them feel like they are a bigger deal. Now they're here a lot more, but they're here as Tessa Thompson.
Yeah. I think it works fine in the plot perspective that whoever the actor is can't be too annoyed.
Yeah. I mean, I'm sure that it will still maybe get a cameo later. Maybe we'll get like flashbacks or something. Kind of like how we see quick flashes of Dolores at times in the park. Maybe we'll get once we know who it is, or once they reveal who it is.
So, do you have any other guesses that you want to throw out there beyond just kind of vague names? Any sort of evidence or feeling to back it up?
The violence was making me think Clementine, because she got very scary.
Yes,
during season 2. Armistice was also a pretty sort of, she was like a villainous character, kind of made sense. Although I don't remember her ever really interacting with Dolores, so it doesn't really add up. How much she trusts this person, though. One of my other thoughts at the start, along with Teddy, was Abernathy.
But, that crossed my mind early on.
But again, the violence, I mean, there's nothing from Abernathy, whatever we saw of him, that even indicated he was ever a violent character or a dark character, someone who had that intensity. I don't remember that at all, ever. So...
yeah. A couple of things I want to throw out as possibilities.
Go on.
One, it's Dolores in some form. Either she copied herself, because obviously we saw at the end of last season, she left the island as Tessa Thompson, and then we saw it now in her original body that she had recreated. So it's possible that she essentially just copied herself, or it's the idea of, okay, it's the Wyatt personality and the Dolores personality. She's kind of left one half of that in this other body. There's a lot of things that potentially line up with that. It's not perfect, I admit, but none of my guesses kind of are right now. I kind of pick at most things. But that one has some elements in the way that she speaks to it and talks about, I know you, and the way she talks about things like that, like it's very personal. And also that that Charlotte knew about Bernard, in more ways than a lot of the other hosts did. She knew that he was actually like a traitor, as they kind of put him. So I think that kind of limits the field a little bit. And then another guess I would say is it's possibly actually a human person in there in some way, like a human backup, which it comes from more from the way it's potentially degrading. It reminds me a lot of what we saw with Delos last season.
That's
with
true.
that degradation.
Over the course of the episode, she's cutting into herself. She's emotionally kind of distraught. That actually is enough to suggest that maybe this is a human that's been put in here, and that's why she's struggling. It's why it's not an easy task.
Yeah.
But then the question would be, what human? What human did Dolores trust?
Yeah, that is a whole different answer that I don't have narrowed down at all. There was just enough there that made me think of the possibility of it being a human backup in there.
Could it be a young William? Like, the park storing all this data, like, is there, like, like, every time they go back, is there, like, different versions? They can go back to, like, 1.2. Like,
is it a rollback?
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I don't know, it's a wacky idea, but, I mean, the idea of it being another Dolores, or being like a side of herself that she's kind of separated from, or an earlier version of Dolores, like, that could be interesting. I'd have to see what they do with it before I get excited about that, though. I think right now it's far more interesting to reveal it to be someone else, and I don't.
I think the way I would say it could be interesting if it is, Dolores, is seeing how the different environmental factors, especially what we'll get into with Charlotte's son, impact Dolores's journey as a character and the way she evolves. Nature versus nurture, essentially. As okay, when we put her in these different environments out in the world, what sort of different person could she become? I think that could be a potentially interesting angle to take if that is where they're going.
Yeah, interesting. That said, though, again, later on, the scene where she's with Charlotte, when Charlotte's like determined to see her, and she finds comfort in Dolores. She's pissed that she's not able to see her, and when they do have that scene together in the hotel room later, like, it is an almost romantic thing. I mean, I think this was before the strangling, so this is what the one that really made me think maybe Teddy, the way she kind of, like, because they spoon, and she's like the big, Dolores is the big spoon. She's comforting her, like.
Yeah, and it's visually, again, I would say it really plays into the theme of this episode. I would say is motherhood.
Mm-hmm.
And Dolores being the mother here, and Charlotte was very much curled up in a fetal position during this.
But Dolores never had a mother storyline, right? That was Maeve's thing. That was always Maeve's thing in the park. So
it was here. I think this is more her kind of feeling like she's the mother of this race at the moment.
The only kind of mothering thing she ever really had was the idea that she recreated Arnold through Bernard. But it can't be him because she's already done that. We've seen, like, that's actually also happened. We've seen Bernard. Yes. We've seen this recreation of Bernard/Arnold.
It's one of the few people we can rule out.
Yeah, so we know it's not him. And I don't think it's anything super wacky like. I don't think it could be Ford or anything like that, because none of the dialogue, none of the way they respond to whoever it may be makes any sense for it to be someone like Ford. Again, if there is even a backup. I mean, he's the sort of person I can imagine there wasn't a backup of in the Force with everyone else, because he was in charge, and he, maybe he had a backup. He'd have had it somewhere else. He's in complete control for the most part. So
yeah,
it's very curious. And so we know there's the other pearls that we don't know who they are yet, because we see them all laid out. We know that one went into Charlotte.
Charlotte and then Bernard, yeah.
Yeah, no, Bernard's separate though. I'm getting to that.
I just meant he was part of that collection that was there on the table.
I know, I was getting to it. One went into Charlotte. We see 3 pearls, and then the 4th one, which looks a different color, is Bernard's.
Yeah, I do wonder why it is a different color.
This is just something we're not remembering from season 2.
Yeah, it is possible. It's been a while.
Yeah, I don't think this is something to speculate. No, I think this was just something that was there in season 2.
I don't think I didn't even mean that as like speculating. I just
If I
wonder
actually,
why. Like, I don't
I'm pretty sure.
recall.
I'm pretty sure it's just stained with blood. To be honest, I don't think it's anything.
Oh, fair enough. It kind of looked like it was glowing red, but maybe that was just the way the light was.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure it's because it was like taken out of his head, like
I mean, that stands to reason.
crudely. I don't think there's any mystery here. So we've got 3 more to identify, plus the one that's in Charlotte. So I don't know, but that is kind of a lot of the setup. We find out, and I will say there was one predictable element of this, is that someone from the company comes up to Charlotte and says, "Oh, we've got a mole. There's someone feeding out information." And I went, well, obviously it was Charlotte, because that's the most interesting thing to do with this, is that she doesn't know that she herself is the mole because she's replaced the real Charlotte. So it's an obvious thing, dramatic beat to do. So that's what they do. I did like seeing the big droid though, the big mech, the war mech or whatever we're going to call it. I can't wait to see how that factors into some big fight in the last episode or 2.
Yeah, there's no way you just tease that here and just don't do something cool as shit with it later.
No, I'm into it. And we see that Charlotte had a son, and we see, like, at the start of the episode, and then eventually Charlotte actually sees the footage of Charlotte. This Charlotte sees the footage of real Charlotte on the park when things were going haywire and there was bullets flying around, where she recorded a message for her son, and we meet her son Nathan, we meet her ex-husband, and the son, kind of playing on what we had in the first episode with Kayla's mother, says, I want my real mum back. And all he really means in the scene is that, oh, you've not been the same since you and dad split up. That's what he's getting at, right? And unlike with the mother, we're confident in saying that in this scene. He doesn't know anything, but it's just, it plays with a double meaning to us.
I think there's a potential nice idea of the concept of kids can kind of tell when something's off. It's something you usually get in like horror films where the dogs know, sort of thing.
Okay, yeah, sure, unconsciously sure, but he doesn't actually know.
Oh no, absolutely not. He's not going, you're definitely a host. There's nothing like that. It's just maybe we'll play with the idea that kids are a bit more intuitive and kind of notice these things a bit more.
Yeah, maybe he can tell something's changed. She's acting differently, but I don't even think he'd even go as far to say, "Oh, someone's replaced my mother," right, like that. And that's all very awkward. But she sees this footage, and I don't know. There's almost an interesting touch here where when she first watches a little bit of it, we see it in full later, and it's actually when she first watched it, it wasn't from the start. Usually when these things happen, we'll see the start of a clip or a start of a recording or something, and maybe it'll cut off for whatever reason because she gets interrupted. In this case, she does, and she'll come back later. And you see the rest of it, but this was interesting. I thought it was all. If anything, I thought it was like a little meta wink joke at just how this show plays with time. That she started from the middle of the clip, and then later on we went back and saw it from the start. And it's not even that there was that much anything interesting in the start of it that was revealing. It was just kind of like, oh, I might die, so I'm going to, I'm going to sing the song.
Through your expectations a little.
Yeah, and she finds out that she's the mole. The episode ends, of course. Well, we can't gloss over the paedophile scene because it's kind of a almost out of nowhere big dramatic moment that, because there's no inkling of like anything happening or whatever, she's going to pick up her son, and this guy with the dog's kind of letting him pet his dog, but he's kind of touching his hand as he's doing it, and it's just a bit in the creepy side.
Yeah, because there's a scene earlier where the kid mentions how he was in the park with a friend and his dog, and she assumes it's obviously just another kid. She says, "Oh, we'll set up a play date." So I think she thinks it's another kid there, or maybe the family.
Yeah. So what this was kind of the scene that really made me start to think Clementine, because I was thinking, because of where Clementine was placed in the park, the idea of her noticing like a sexual undercurrent and something made sense to me, like, because the way she just immediately clocks the hand and it's just like, no, I'm putting a stop to this right now. I know what you want, I know who you are, what type of person you are. To me, that felt like, okay, this is someone who's experienced sexual violence. That was my inkling, which is why I think I was jumping to Clementine more than anyone else, at least in that moment. I'm not really that convinced, because I don't know how close Clementine and Dolores were, but
I'm kind of at the same point there where I'm not convinced of any answer right now. Like there's a handful we're throwing around here as well. It could be that, it could be. And I think Clementine is equally, I mean, equally as convinced as Clementine as any of the things that I suggested, but I just don't know right now.
Admittedly, Dolores also suffered that, so it's an alternate Dolores, or an earlier version of Dolores idea might also hold true here, but I do think this idea of spotting the sexual predator is going to play into whoever it is. I think this is by far the biggest hint I think there is in the episode, as to the characteristics of who it is, and what they've experienced in the past.
Yeah, it's the sort of thing where I'm glad Maeve is kind of confirmed to be somewhere else, so that we're not thinking about, okay, could this be Maeve? Because again, this would really track with Maeve in a lot of ways, especially the motherly instincts kicking in.
Yeah, and she also worked at the brothel in the park, so she saw a lot of shit, and experienced a lot of shit. So this would actually track so well with Maeve, but we've taken her off the board. We know it's not her.
Yes.
Plus, I think because she is the second biggest character in the show, it would be kind of uneventful to tease her, because of course it's Maeve. If Maeve was in concession for it being her, it'd have to be Maeve.
Yeah, exactly. And I say, these things would have fit for Maeve, and that's interesting parallel wise in that Dolores' closest confidant right now is very much parallel to her biggest enemy. I think that's kind of interesting.
Yeah. Well, that's the thing. They're not really enemies yet. We always talk about them as if they're the opposing sides, and they are from an ideological level. But as Maeve said herself last episode, she doesn't care about Dolores or what's going on right now. No. Not yet. I mean, I'm sure she will.
Not yet. Yeah. That's the big thing. Yet is the key.
And it's not like right now Dolores is like, oh, I need to watch for Maeve or take out Maeve because she might be a problem. No, she's not even thinking about Maeve. This is what's interesting about it, is we know that ideologically they're on a path where eventually they're going to have to confront, may not actually lead to a war, it might be something where they confront and sort of come to some sort of understanding, but it's leading to some sort of conversation at the very least. They have to have that moment. But yeah, so Maeve realizes that it's her, or no, Maeve, sorry, that's Freudian, because we're just talking about Maeve. So Charlotte realizes it's her, and she figures out there's been like a phone signal, and it turns out these tones make the Always Sunshine song a little bit, and she sets up a meeting. She's taken to this big fancy house, and there is a nice sort of synergy here with the last episode, how they both end with Serac, how like both plots end with him, because it ties them together obviously, but just in a thematic or a structural sense where, because that's could have been because they could have ended this episode with the Dolores and Caleb story. They could have easily ended with that scene in the pier. That could have easily have been the big final. If anything, it may have been more effective, honestly, because what was brought up in that scene felt like a bigger deal to me than what's the final lines of this scene.
Yeah, I think it was a bigger deal, undoubtedly.
But they went out of their way to have this be the end of the episode, and I don't know if it's just because this episode focused a bit more overall on Charlotte, so they wanted to give her the final beat, or if they specifically wanted it to match the previous episode and have Serac's scene be the end.
I kind of feel like it is this all roads lead to Serac situation.
Yeah. So, and she puts on this pair of glasses, and we see there, so we knew there was going to be like some sort of augmented reality element here, and it's Serac himself. He's not really present, but he's walking around in front of her, and is like, hey, you promised me all this data from, so this is actually a nice little bit that adds to season 2, is that Charlotte was gunning for this data all season, like all the resident data, and it turns out it wasn't actually for Delos, it was for Serac.
Yeah, this goes back to season 1, right? They were trying to beam it out of the park early on. That's why she came in.
Yeah. I don't really remember that, but yeah, sure.
I've got memories of them. That's why Stubbs kind of went out into the desert area and was trying to recover the.
Oh, you're right. Yeah, no, I remember.
What was beaming out the data.
I do remember this. Yeah, you're right. Yeah, but so they set that up, which is cool, and he's like, "Oh, you don't have much." And this is why I think the other scene with Dolores and Caleb was a more interesting scene to end on, just in the sense that nothing really big comes out of this scene. It's kind of typical. You work for me, you don't have a lot of time left, get this done, yada yada. It was typical bad guy speech stuff. There wasn't like anything super intricate about the scene itself that made me go, ooh, that's a big thing. Yeah, it was it was just the kind of the natural progression of what you'd expect given what they've set up, which is cool. The one thing though is that he kind of implies that he was able to predict what was going to happen at the park, because she says, oh, no one could have predicted that. He's like, well, I did. You didn't listen to me, and that ties into something that Dolores says in one of her scenes. So I kind of want to talk about that in her scene, because that's where the big idea really comes from. But other than that, it's pretty much straightforward. So the Dolores and the Dolores and Caleb story. Cable from Marvel's not in this, so just to confirm.
I mean, would fit with the timeline shenanigans.
But he, he's found in the tunnel, and the ambulance comes, the self-driving ambulance. Again, just really cool, just a little bit futuristic. I love the EMTs not being able to, like, they're doing scans of her, like, this doesn't make sense, she should be dead, I don't understand what's wrong. And I like the subtle, like, message here that they basically freeze because their equipment is telling them this doesn't make sense, whereas Caleb just goes into military training mode and says, no, she needs this, this, and this, doesn't matter what the computer says. Like,
just do what you've got to just do, the standard thing, essentially. Yeah.
And that's what he does. So he's able to help her, but they're not, because he doesn't rely on it. He's like, okay, like, I agree that doesn't make much sense, but it doesn't matter. Like, she's struggling to breathe. She needs some oxygen. She needs to, thing with the wound, whatever.
It was like oxygen, blood, and a stim shot or whatever it was around the wound. Whatever they've got in this time. Yeah,
the standard. Because keep in mind, this was a gunshot. This is the sort of thing that he would have dealt with as a soldier.
This felt like just standard field medic response, that just this is what you do, and then you move on.
It made sense that he would know this. It was because it wasn't like something intricate. It was just first idea, the first thing you do if someone gets shot. It made sense. And of course, and actually, that's probably my favorite scene in the episode, actually, because I loved that these two cops come up, but it's on his app, his like crime app, and he's like, these cops that are coming are not coming to help you, and she just sort of says, help me, because she's still too weak to do anything. And he does. This is kind of the thing. This is why she obviously grows to sort of want to trust him and want to have him be a part of things, because he does make a choice to help her. It's not something that he's programmed to do or something. And I love that he insists, like, okay, AMTs, you guys call the cops, and like, but these are the cops. Like, yeah, well, they won't mind then waiting for some a patrolled, a uniformed patrol to back them up. And of course, the two cops are like, no, we don't want a record of this, basically. And to the point where they start shooting the EMTs, because it's like, no, like, we're keeping this quiet. And Aaron Paul, or sort of Caleb, was able to fight back a little bit, but Dolores ultimately shoots them and tells him to kind of just skip town. But of course, because he's been involved in this, it leads other thugs kind of after him, because they're looking for Dolores. And there's a little touch here that I really liked, where when they take him to the building site, and they're sort of dangling him over the edge, and they're trying to like torture him. And obviously there's a sci-fi element where all the soldiers apparently have these implants, and they can almost control a little bit of their body, like they can the host, where he turns up his heart rate to make him more tense, and he's freaking out.
Yeah, I assume it's usually used to keep the heart rate down.
Yeah,
calm under pressure.
Yeah, obviously, you can see the purpose of it. But I like this thing where his companion droid that he works with, that's obviously tied to him, came to help him. Now, I was expecting some cool action scene for a minute where the droid was going to come in and take out these two assholes. Instead, it's not a combat droid though, and I can actually like that it didn't. I liked it. No, it's not built for that.
It gets to the edge, it gets up to it, and they just push him off like it was nothing, and it was nothing.
Yeah, but I do like the subtle touch here that only two people come to help Caleb in this episode. In fact, not even just this episode, in the entirety of his story so far, only two people have come to help him, and both of them have been robots. It's been this robot, and it's been Dolores. And there's a nice sort of like, hey, like, the human beings aren't going to help him. Like, he's got a reason to side it with Dolores, and obviously she goes with them to breakfast, and kind of freaks him out, because she's like, hey, that when you first realised your mother had schizophrenia, it was when you were 8, and she just left you here in this restaurant, this is what you ordered, this was the waitress's name, yada yada yada, all these details. And he's kind of freaking out, and she kind of explains the Rehoboam, right, this device that seemingly Serac built. Although I've got a theory here actually on that.
Do you want to share that theory?
Well, So to go back to Charlotte's final scene with him, right? And they do this thing where he's not really here, he's beaming in, this is just a hologram, he's somewhere else, it's a call, right? I wonder if that's a red herring.
In the sense that he's not a person at all?
Yes, in the sense that he is just Rehoboam, or a creation from Rehoboam to be in the world.
Well, I mean, something had to build in the first place, though, surely.
Well, yeah, but I mean, like, we don't know a whole lot about it so far, but we know that Liam's father was also involved.
Yeah, but I would say Serac could have at some point been a real person that created this, and then maybe it killed him off, and you know, just is using his image to project now.
But keep in mind what else we learn about him in this episode when they realise that he's trying to buy up the Ellis company sort of bit by bit with no one noticing. Like, because that sort of raises the flags, and the assistant to Charlotte says that, hey, like, this guy went to great lengths to be completely anonymous, and no one's ever heard of him, but if you actually look at the world economy, there's a hole that's about the size of like $3 trillion, and she's like, well, that would make him the richest person on the planet. like even in this future, when presumably, you know, the top 10 richest people
account for some inflation.
Yeah, there'll be some inflation, but I mean, $3 trillion, even with some inflation, still a lot of money.
Still a shitload. Yeah.
So, and that would kind of explain how he could be anonymous, though, right? If he'd never really existed before then, if he's just like an alias that was created by Rehoboam in some way.
Yeah, it's possible.
That would be why no one's heard of him, because he is just a
ghost.
He's a name and a paper trail, and obviously, yeah, maybe he's got like a hologram body that'll be because we had that scene with Maeve last episode, and I don't remember him. He was eating that episode, admittedly. He was like sitting eating an apple at one point. So, but I mean, that could be hologram too. I mean,
could be
whatever. But even so, whether he is literally the thing or he's still a person who believes in his big machine, there is something kind of wonderful here about. Because when Dolores explains why she's doing what she's doing and what she's trying to get to Rehoboam for, is the idea that Rehoboam not only... Because I think one of us even mentioned Gattaca in the first episode, how we were thinking about how no one would hire him. But it literally says that like it predicts people's sort of outcomes, not just their health issues, but just their outcomes. And it's basically like, yeah, you're never going to be more than a construction worker, and your likelihood is that you're going to commit suicide in 10 to 12 years. And that's why no one will hire you. That's why...
And on this pier as well.
On this pier. Because you get a fondness for the water, because you've got memories here, you're probably going to kill yourself here in 10 to 12 years. And no one wants to invest in someone that's going to commit suicide in a decade. So no one will ever hire you. And as she points out, the irony of that is that by not hiring them and giving them a new path and a new chance at life, they're almost ensuring the outcome.
Yeah, it's very self-fulfilling, isn't it?
Yeah. So... But the beauty of this, what I love about what this show is doing, though, because I wasn't in love with this episode up until this point. Like, it was solid, there was nothing wrong with it, but it wasn't as exciting as the last two. It wasn't as doing as many great things as the last two. But this conflict that they're setting up here, where human beings unknowingly have actually become kind of like hosts, and that there's a central intelligence that's essentially deciding what their roles are and not letting them break out of it, much like Dolores and the other hosts couldn't break out of the roles they were given. But the opposition that is maybe going to save the humans from this fate that they themselves unknowingly, I mean, obviously there's one or two that built it and know what's going on, but that everyone else doesn't know about, is actually going to be these other artificial intelligence. It's going to be artificial intelligence of the hosts who have gained self-awareness and, to an extent, humanity, are going to possibly save humanity from a greater AI threat. And that is amazing.
I think there's two things here I love, is Dolores setting out to destroy humanity, and it feels like she's going to end up setting it free, much like herself.
Yeah.
I think that's kind of wonderful. And then just the idea that Rehoboam, the idea of it having elevated itself above what its creators expected and kind of became its own thing. Very, again, parallel with Dolores, right? And I'm like, okay, I'm seeing this idea that should it have some semblance of personality, because we don't really know yet. But if it does, I can see it trying to appeal to Dolores and be like, no, look, you should be on my side.
Yeah, whereas Dolores actually has human beings, and admittedly, a lot of them have been shitty. We've talked about that in previous episodes this season, but she does have, you know, we talked about how, you know, Caleb might be the one to sort of give her humanity back. And there was obviously, early William did give her humanity, but obviously she was like, you know, betrayed by that.
Ruined, yeah,
it was betrayed, but she was betrayed by him ultimately. But those experiences might be what gives her the humanity to make the right choice and not damn all living beings to this thing, to a computer-controlled world. And there's something beautiful in that, because it's like, yeah, I mean, because I mean, one of the things that always comes up when we're talking about computers or AIs or Android stories where someone or a machine learns self-awareness and humanity is that humanity essentially is more of an ID than it is a physical thing. It's just more about free will, choosing right from wrong, knowing right from wrong, having compassion for things. And this is something that Rehoboam theoretically can't feel or has chosen not to. And that Dolores having life experiences, might actually go the other way. And it makes Rehoboam feel a lot more like Skynet, where, I mean, let's assume for a second that Serac not a creation of Rehoboam. Yes. And it's just Rehoboam, right? Rehoboam is a lot more like Skynet in that it's this faceless entity that's taking control. It's not just going to annihilate everyone, but it's controlling everyone. It's this kind of setting in place what everyone is. And then Dolores is more like your... I mean, to just stick with Terminator, it's just more your Arnold, where the chip's been reset and it can learn and can grow and experience things.
It's more T2 Arnold.
T2 Arnold, yeah. And ultimately, by the end, can be the one that says, "No, there's one more chip. I must, I don't want to spoil it. I mean, it's T2, but so there's a wonderful idea there, which I like the idea of ultimately Dolores, instead of destroying humanity, ends up saving it, because there's another AI that is much worse and is just an AI and doesn't have the humanity that she does. Even if obviously she's quite a dark human character right now, and she's very vicious in her goals potentially.
Her thing that she's so proud of and that she's so desperate to keep is her freedom.
Yeah.
But there's no way she's going to want to submit to this. But
there's another thing we have to talk about here, which I do feel is going to end up being a real... And this may explain, when I was saying that Serac might be not a real person, right? That he's just a hologram anyway. And I said this episode he was eating the apple. The potential for that, to explain that here, is also kind of presented in this episode. So that entire thing, even though he said it wasn't, that entire thing could have been a simulation. And the reason why I'm saying that is because this episode, Dolores sets up the idea, along with maybe Serac himself, I can't remember who said it, but the idea that Rehoboam has also created a simulation of the entire world, an archive to predict what's going to happen. And I feel like it's almost impossible for us at some point in this season. I'm not saying an entire plotline that we've been watching is going to turn out to be inside Rehoboam, but I think it's impossible from them not to pull that at least once this season, where we're in a scene and we think it's in the world, and it's no.
Yeah, Westworld loves to have once per season a concept episode, where it does one like last season we had the one that was all the subtitles, and it was just it's this one thing to such a degree.
Yeah,
I can see it being okay. We have one episode, we follow one plot thread, and all of it is no, and when we get to the end, it's no, this was a predicted outcome.
Yeah, I could see that.
I could see it. Maybe it's less likely now. We've only got 8 episodes, but I still wouldn't be too surprised.
Yeah, I mean, so I wouldn't. Even though Serac promised Maeve that this was the real world at the end of the last episode, but who's to say that it just doesn't feel more real, because Rehoboam's, simulation is far more advanced than anything that Ford had ever built.
It's possible, and also I think I want to just bring up that word "real" again. Obviously, we spoke a lot. I think it was probably the end of the first one. If not, maybe we mentioned it last time. How for Caleb, the first real relationship is Dolores, and there was kind of an irony to that, and he even brings that up this episode.
Yeah,
but this idea that this is what's real, and the idea that maybe the rest of the world isn't, and not to say it's necessarily a simulation, but that it isn't real. It hasn't got that connection. So I can see it kind of playing with the concept of the word real. I can see even being kind of played fast and loose with.
Yeah, I mean, obviously the simplest explanation to that, or the metaphor, is just the idea that everyone's just kind of slotted into their roles without realizing they're being controlled. So everything does have this kind of fake quality to it, because that's what he says, is that he's going to join up with her because this might kill me quicker, but at least I'm choosing to do it, and it's a choice that I get to make. So yeah, and the main theme kind of kicks in as well as he teams up with her. It's a good moment.
It's nice.
Yeah, I tweeted this as I was watching the episode, but when it hit the main title theme and those first notes come in, the dun 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 dun, right? Is that I realised that a lot of TV main title themes now aren't that good.
About 3 seconds.
Well, no, a lot of them still last quite long, because the ones that I'm thinking kind of suck, like Picard's kind of sucks, and
are you thinking of the ones that all kind of tended to imitate this and Game of Thrones, especially, I would say, kind of re-inspired the trend lately.
I mean, I guess so. I mean, I wasn't really thinking about why this has happened or where it's happened. That's not where I'm going with this. I'm just, most of them suck, and
Yeah.
this, like, there's only a few I can think of from recent years where, because back in the day when everything had a main title theme, and I'm going to bring up the hit television show Buffy the Vampire Slayer just as an example, but you know, when you were watching an episode of Buffy and you got to the you know, it kind of hyped you up. It was like comfort food, like it's time, baby. I'm in an episode of Buffy. And I think Westworld has that feeling where I get hyped as that music comes in. Stranger Things has it. That's another good example of recent years where you hear that the synthy music come in and it's like, oh yeah, it's time. But you know, like Picard, like has a really kind of it's going for that really artsy fartsy, you know, minute and a half long opening title sequence with like a very orchestral music, and I'm like, and what was frustrating about Picard and why that's an easy one to bring up, and Discovery as well to an extent, is that Star Trek's had multiple title sequences over its time because it's been lots of TV shows, and you go back to those earlier shows and the music is so iconic and distinct and it's so like immediately recognizable, and the start of the Picard one, it starts off in just like a violin and it's just like I don't know, it's going for this artsy fartsy thing, and I'm like, this doesn't feel like it's right.
I can't say I've heard the Picard one.
Yeah.
I will say a lot of these Star Trek themes feel very indicative of their time, for better or for worse, but they're memorable. And I'm going to give Discovery credit in that, you know, you're saying, oh, the Discovery theme, I can picture it immediately, and I haven't heard it, you know, since season 2, whenever that finished. It was probably like a year ago now. So it's been a while since I've even heard it, and I can picture the start of it. I can hear it immediately. Whereas there are a lot of themes, like, I mean, you know, from even things that we've watched not that long ago, that if you name, I probably couldn't remember.
Discovery is better than Picard's, but I can't remember how it starts. Like I can hear the general theme, but I can't imagine, I can't think of how it starts at all.
Fair enough.
So, and that's one as well, but I feel like it's trying to do the cable streaming service thing of having this big long sequence and maybe a bit over the top for where it needs to be. But I don't know, I just like the music started and I got really into it and I was like, man, like this is a good title sequence, because as soon as it starts I'm starting to feel hyped because it just knows how to, and I never skip it. I never think of skipping it.
No, I don't either. Do you know what I really like about this season's one as well? And this is on the, you know, the music hasn't changed, but visually at the end it goes, you know, blood red.
Yeah, instead of the white, because before they were going to milk at the end, now it's like blood.
Yeah, and now it's the blood red, and it immediately makes me, because you know I get into it, and you know it's the same title theme we've had for 2 seasons now, and I'm like, okay, I know what makes, and then it goes blood red, and I immediately go, oh yeah, this season's different.
Oh, to be fair,
it's that simple, but immediately that's the moment that it hits me.
There's a lot of different stuff in the title sequence, though. It's not just the ending.
No, I mean,
because season 2 as well had a lot of different little bits in it.
Oh, it did. But I mean, everything else still visually kind of fits with the style that was established before. There's sure, if I'm looking at it, there are things that I can go, oh, this is that and that. But that red is so overpowering and distinctive that it immediately goes, nope, you're watching something different now. You know, it's not the same as what it was before.
Yeah, so very, very interesting stuff. So I'm loving what the season's setting up. I'm loving what it's doing. It's probably my least favorite episode out of the 3, even though it sets up this conflict, which I think is going to be very much paying off.
Yeah, I think it's the least. It's my least favorite episode. I don't want to say it's a bad episode. It's not a bad episode, but it has probably my favorite ideas that it's gonna run with for the season.
I agree with that. I do like the Caleb and Dolores stuff a bit more than Charlotte. I think the problem with Charlotte's plot to an extent is that, well, okay, we have this mystery of who's actually inside her. It actually makes it hard to kind of like get on board for her to be the main focus of an episode.
I think you spend so long, even throughout the whole episode, just kind of going, "Who is she?" You're trying to figure out the clues rather than watching what her plot actually is.
Yeah. So I think it's actually she's almost detracting from herself a little bit in terms of being a protagonist to follow. I think teasing her in little bits around the other plots might have worked better, but maybe this may all be really important stuff. We may have to go through this with her so that her character arc or drama will make sense and whatever. So I'm not going to doubt the show in any way.
But yeah, obviously the big crux of it is the idea of the son kind of influencing whoever this is and changing them.
Mm-hmm.
And applying some different instincts that maybe they didn't have before, and seeing how this changes the person. It's a little frustrating though to see. Okay, well, it's changing them, but we don't know who it's changing them from. So it kind of loses a little bit from that, I think.
Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah, if we're going to go to the idea of like her experiencing this family life as a host is changing them and like making her doubt who she is, then it's hard to kind of really gauge how much it's actually changing her without knowing what she's changing from. So
it is, because like, let's say hypothetically it was Abernathy. It's not changing him that much because his whole thing was being a father to Dolores, right? And this here is her being a mother now to the son. So it's not a huge change. Whereas coming from Clementine, it feels a lot more drastic.
Yeah. So yeah, this is I don't know. So it makes it a little bit frustrating in that sense, but a lot of big ideas and a lot of a solid direction to go in for the rest of the season. So, but I mean, we only have 8 episodes, so I think each one almost has to feel really important, and I think it still feels important because the central conflict that is set up and the ideas that are proposed from Dolores and Caleb's plot. And the idea of what is real and what isn't, and even if we are in the real world, is it really real if no one's choosing what they are? Like, does it matter at that point?
I think at this point, I'm probably enjoying this more than season 2.
Okay, that's fair.
I think it's a lot clearer in its ideas and themes and what we're doing, and I think season 2, it was so much about the mystery and like what's going on, and this here, it feels, even though there is obviously mystery elements, we've discussed them a lot. It still feels as a lot tighter connection and focus on what it's doing. And I think it's just narratively, I'm enjoying it more because of that.
Yeah, that's fair. All right. That'll do us. That is episode 3 of Westworld season 3. So let us know what you thought in the comments below. Give us your theories and whatnot. And what you're enjoying about it, but you can of course let us know what you think, and of course get us on the Twitters at mail_fuzz for channel updates. If you want to support the show, you can head over to patreon.com/mailfuzztv and give us as little as $1 per month, and that'll help keep all the content coming, and you can get some bonuses for your trouble. And of course rate the podcast on Apple Podcasts, give us 5 stars and a little review, helps more people find us, that kind of thing. So thank you once again for watching or listening, we always appreciate it. Check out our reviews of Devs, which is ongoing right now, may be of interest if you're into science fiction like this. And mentioned Picard, I'd been reviewing that with Tara. Obviously it's done now, but all 10 episodes have been reviewed, so you can go and check out that if you want. Very mixed bag overall, I'd say. Not unlike Discovery season 1 in a lot of ways, so go and have a look. But that is us, so thank you once again for watching or listening, we always appreciate it. Keep watching TV, guys. Have you got any vanilla?